and we experience pain in our lives, and sometimes it stays with us. And researchers have been trying to understand this for a long time. Fear results from past experience. It affects our ability to move, and it also affects our experience with pain, and then causes stress when we can't function in our lives the way that we would like to. And so you see how this ultimately becomes this really self-fulfilling prophecy and a really just debilitating cycle that is very, very difficult to break and often goes on for years and years and years. So that's why we're here to talk about this in terms of moving. So I just want to drop in here at the very high level some understanding about the research that's out there increasingly, especially in the past 5 to 10 years, that chronic pain is often not related to your actual structural damage. For example, there was a study in which they took people without back pain off the street, just they didn't have any symptoms. They put them on an MRI machine. 65% of them, 65% had disc bulges, herniations, spondylolisthesis, stenosis, no pain. We know that phantom limb syndrome causes all kinds of pain, and yet there's nothing going on in the moment after an amputation. So there's all kinds of linkages around the fact that the brain could be more responsible for your chronic pain symptoms than anything going on physically in the rest of your body. And I've just highlighted here a few things that you could look up in terms of research. Failed back surgery syndrome, where people have surgery and no results, no relief. There's lots of research out there about how physical therapy has been found to be as effective as surgery in addressing pain. And there's some great studies around knee osteoarthritis where this has happened. They've used hypnosis in place of anesthesia for surgery. And then there's some interesting studies around whiplash where they had placebo or fake car crashes, but they simulated the experience of a car crash and people felt that they were having whiplash pain. So this is not to scare you or overwhelm you with like scientific stuff, but to say that you or we are more empowered to control our experience of pain and engage in movement activities than we might believe. And that's really the point of this, is that it is possible to move. Part of the reason that we advocate for movement so much is because of the benefits on the nervous system. So your body will releases chemicals that actually help with pain processing and mental well-being, both of which are really important for quality of life, like dopamine, noradrenaline, and serotonin, for example. So I want to talk about some myths that we have, some, I think, kind of culturally established beliefs that we have about movement that are really negatively impact our ability to get active, and I want to talk about them. So the first is that the best approach to a pain flare-up is rest. So obviously, if you broke your arm yesterday, please lie down. Please get some ice and rest and medical attention. But if you broke your arm 20 years ago, and it's, you're having a day where suddenly your arm or elbow or whatever is hurting you and you have nothing structurally wrong, I'm here to tell you that the answer is more movement, not less. And in fact, I have a physical therapist friend that I often co-present with. And, she would say that these days, they even say if you like sprain your ankle within 3 days, you should be moving again. So movement, why we say more movement, I've already talked about the positive chemicals in the brain. So it's just good for pain processing. It's going to help you feel better to be active in some way. But also, physical activity is really important for your health. It reduces all-cause mortality risk. It improves your pain perception, your sleep quality. It reduces susceptibility to infection. We talked about how it helps balance your autonomic nervous system. It reduces mental decline. It's good for cognition. But also it helps coax your muscles out of that guarding. So if we are in a chronic pain situation and the brain has decided everything is scary and dangerous, we have to help coax the brain out of that interpretation of sensation. And we can't do that if we stay still, because if we stay still, we're reinforcing to our brain, this is dangerous, I have to avoid it. So movement priority number one is that we move regularly in a way that increases confidence. So I'm not saying, you've been having chronic, sciatica for 10 years, so go out and run a marathon. But, maybe we do some seated bicep curls or we do some ankle or footwork. I mean, really any kind of movement is going to have a positive impact in your body. And then we increase bit by bit to build that confidence, remove that fear of movement, and get the brain to understand we are safe doing this. Myth number two, if a movement hurts, you should avoid it. Here's a more controversial one. So as long as we know that a movement is safe, again, if you broke your arm yesterday or sprained your ankle yesterday, then, probably don't step on it if the doctor says not to step on it. But if you've been cleared by a medical professional, you've gone through your physical therapy already, and a movement just hurts you, but you know that it's safe, then you've got to face the fear of it head on, or we'll never beat it. So avoiding movements just leads to reduced function, disuse, and likely depression. If we're afraid, facing those movements will help us address, again, that guarding reflex. And now that we understand that pain is actually linked to things that are going on in your brain, again, avoiding your activity is going to make that worse. And a perfect example of this is something that I think so many of us have heard, and I heard it too when I hurt my back. Never bend over at the waist again. You had a disc herniation, you have whatever. I was told I had SI joint instability and all kinds of hip issues, and they told me never bend over again. So what does that mean in life? I can't do my laundry, I can't put the dishes in the dishwasher, I can't go grocery shopping, put stuff in the cart. Like, that's just functionally not possible. I have to be able to bend over. So I actually did avoid that movement for a really long time, and you know what happened? My pain got so much worse, and I got so much more afraid of it. Like, when I finally got to the point where I started working with someone to try and redress the ability to bend over forward and load it, like add weight to it, I would cry sometimes. I was so freaked out. And now I can deadlift 130 pounds. So I had to kind of build that trust in my body and also teach my brain that movement was not scary. Like, sometimes we internalize the messages we hear from our medical professionals, and then it's actually really debilitating. So that's an anecdotal story, but I've seen it with my clients as well. Once we've ruled out the fact that something is unsafe, the best thing we can do is get it back in our movement repertoire, because I got to tell you, sitting down, standing up, walking, bending over, we need these things. If we stop using them, we're going to lose them. So movement priority number two is to identify the movements that are inaccessible and break them into pieces. So I have a lot of clients that come in. I work with a lot of severe hip arthritis people who are candidates for joint replacement. And walking is usually really difficult. And they have a lot of pain around the walking because, when you have a severe arthritis, you might get a stabbing every now and then that is very scary. So what do? We work on lunging, we work on squatting, we work on hip flexion, we work on foot movements, we work on pushing off the floor. We break walking into several pieces. And by doing that, you get strength, and then you can start just in the individual places, and you can start to string them together. So we don't want to tackle, if you're afraid of skiing, like let's not tackle skiing like all at once. But maybe we work on, some bending at the knees. We work on, some forward torso motions, et cetera. I'm not a skier, so you can probably tell. But we break it into pieces so that we can safely address things that we're afraid of or that typically hurt us, and get as far as we can in that way. And then the final myth here is that you should avoid strength training if you have chronic joint pain. And I see this a lot where folks believe that because they've had something going on with their knee or their hip, it means that they should avoid resistance training. And again, I'm going to say the same disclaimer. Obviously, if you're under the care of a physical therapist and you've been told that you have an active tear that needs healing, etc., no, I'm not going to tell you to go and lift a weight. But resistance training is incredibly important. It's important because it increases joint stability. So if you're someone who has arthritis, or all of us are going to develop arthritis and arthritic changes in our bones, I mean, that's just part of the aging process. But having strong muscles helps us create joint stability so that we can stay active and avoid the pain. If you're someone who is going to be a candidate for joint replacement surgery, you're likely to have greater success if you build muscle in advance. And I actually have a client who is 2 weeks post hip replacement surgery, and she went through my Find Your Feet program and was terrified of walking. And we worked really closely. She started building up her confidence. And, I just got a text yesterday that she's going up and down the stairs and feels better than she did, before surgery, and she's doing really great. So I've seen this over and over again with joint replacement surgery. Prehab is super important. And then just as an aside, I mean, resistance training is tied to increasing bone density. That's really important, especially if you're a risk factor for osteoporosis. We know that muscle mass declines at about 3 to 8% per decade, and then after 50, it's 5 to 10%. So we have to work just to keep the muscle mass that we have. And muscle mass is really important because, like I said, falls is a really big, issue as we age. And being able to withstand a fall, to prevent a fall, and also to get up after a fall really is important that we have strength. And then this is just a reference to a study that showed that even strength training just once per week, they took a bunch of folks over the age of, I want to say 60, let's say, it was older folks, and they had them go from being sedentary to doing strength training either once or multiple times per week. Even just once per week, they found it reduced cardiovascular disease risk and mortality. So movement priority number 3 is to make sure you have resistance training in your repertoire, and you do it at least once per week. I hope you guys are all with me so far. So I'll take a moment to have a plug for Pilates. So it doesn't have to be Pilates, honestly, like any strength training, I would say do any movement, or have your loved one, if you're here because you have a loved one who is going through chronic pain, any movement that makes that person feel good, feel confident, stay active, stay mobile, that's the movement practice that's for them. But Pilates is particularly special because you can probably see behind me, we have very specific equipment that's created with springs that allows us to both add resistance in a way that is non-joint straining, but also allows us to offload body weight so that you can work on things like stepping up and stepping down with a little bit of something that kind of counterweight, basically, that reduces your load on your joints. So if you go to the Pilates Method Alliance, you'll find a 22-page document with all of the resources on why Pilates is amazing. But it's been found to help with back pain, neck pain, osteoarthritis, posture, endurance, etc. So I'll make just a little plug for Pilates. And then I'll just take a couple moments to talk about our own Find Your Feet program. I mentioned it earlier. So we have an 8-week program that's designed to tackle the stress, fear, and pain cycle in a really specific way that is evidence-based. So I think we've kind of made the case already that we know that we can improve chronic pain by increasing physical activity, by increasing mindfulness, which helps to balance the sympathetic nervous system with things like meditation and somatic tracking. It's also helpful to understand the nature of pain and the role of the nervous system. So there's a lot of research out there that shows that if you combine exercise with pain education, you have way better results for chronic pain, especially back pain, than if you just do the exercise. And that's because, again, we're able to train the brain that movement is safe. And we really aren't able to do that unless we understand the evidence and can kind of talk ourselves out of it. It's sort of like if you're afraid of flying, It's really helpful to, look at the statistics around how safe planes are and, how planes work. And, it's like, unless you understand that about a plane is terrifying. Like the body does not feel like it should be up in space, like up in the air. Um, so we know that it's important to have safe exposure to fear generating movements with a positive mindset. We know it's also important to have a sense of community and belonging. Social isolation is a huge contributor to pain experience. And we know it's important to have confidence, and we call it self-efficacy, but it's essentially the ability to do things for yourself. Um, so, we build that into the approach in our 8-week program, which is helping our participants understand the nature of pain, helping them observe, to be mindful in their movement practice, but to not judge the sensations, not to jump to conclusions. We start incorporating movements that are fear provoking in order to get to a movement program that helps kind of progress beyond those things that they've been perhaps avoiding. And then we establish confidence uh, in the movement itself. And that's why we call it Find Your Feet, because you're probably finding your feet by getting oriented to getting active again for the first time after maybe spending a long time being inactive and being in pain. Um, but also it's a feat because it's hard. You're really trying to overcome something to get to a goal that you set for yourself. And we always work around a specific goal. I mean, for some people, it's the ability to walk for 10 minutes without being afraid that they're going to get stuck somewhere in pain. For others, it's like, I really want to pick up my grandchild. And so we are working on movements that are specifically supporting that activity. So, that's the meaning behind the name. So we know all those things are good for us. We know all those things help us with pain, but it's really hard to do them on our own, because it's difficult to stick to a movement program. I mean, that's true whether you're in pain or not. And being in pain is like extra hard because, you don't know, you're like not sure what it's going to mean for you that day. Are you going to have a flare up? Are you going to suddenly, try something new and it's going to be scary? And that's difficult. It's also hard without a coach to help you understand which movements are going to be safe during a flare up. And, I only take on people who, whose situations I understand really well so that I can make sure that I can protect them in those cases. Um, Another barrier is just the helplessness and fear. I mean, chronic pain is an all-encompassing emotional experience, and it's very normal to feel that it's difficult to keep trying because you're afraid it's going to go on forever and ever. It's hard to filter all the information that's out there down to what you really need. There's, 8 million meditation gurus on the internet, and it's kind of hard to know where to start. And then, there are personal characteristics that contribute to having a hard time moving with chronic pain, like perfectionism, self-criticism, and fear of failure. We're afraid to start something, because those characteristics are just very often shared among my chronic pain clients, because we're kind of all up in our heads and we're already in a state of intensity or stress. And as we have already talked about, that really contributes to it. So the way that Find Your Feet is really designed is to try to combat those barriers, because those barriers are very real. And we know that it's one thing to say, okay, I know I need to get active, I know I need strength training, I know I need to learn, but trying to do all that on your own while, facing this uphill battle of waking up in pain every day is really, really difficult. And I'm saying that as a person who it has taken many, many years, and I still wake up some days and I feel like I'm going to slip back into daily pain. And so I know what that's like. So we have weekly activities in this program. Every week there's a reading that's very limited, kind of structured around a specific module, with some pain education to really help, again, just giving that brain that evidence it needs to know that it's safe to move, it's okay. There's a journal prompt where you're expected to reflect on the education of that week and how it relates to your own movement experience. There's a weekly private Pilates session We do these mostly in person, but we can also do them virtually. We have a Find Your Feet virtual class that is only the Find Your Feet participants. So we get together once a week to have a kind of community building mat class that's very restorative and supportive, incorporates mindfulness, and is always designed to be safe for the participants. Again, I take a really small group because I want to make sure I can accommodate everybody's needs. And then there's a 30-minute coaching session every week. So I'm here to be your accountability person. I'm here to help you process your flare-ups. I'm here to talk about like what that education piece meant for you and what and get you more if you need it. And then, you have support to me 7 days a week. I'm available by text message throughout this program. And people really take advantage of that. I'm not feeling like I can do this today, DK. Like I'm feeling really stressed. I want to go for a walk, but I'm afraid. And in one case, I went and found the person and took a walk with them. And it's really like a concierge coaching approach to just getting out of that rut because you can do this. I mean, I've seen it with myself. I've seen it in my clients. I know it's possible to, um, you know, to tackle the role that chronic pain plays in our lives and reclaim our life.